Hello. Welcome to my podcast. I am SpookyLith. We're here today, after a long time, back once again. It's been a while since I thought, let me go record a podcast. But here we are. I'm recording, but I might turn this mic up a little bit. Hello, testing, 1, 2. Yeah, we'll turn it up a little bit. So welcome to my channel. Now, as you know, if you've watched any of my previous videos, I am not the greatest speaker. Far from it. I'm terrible at public speaking and doing speeches and speaking out loud. Really not my forte. But I want to do a little podcast type of thing, so really the best way to go about that would be to just do it. Maybe I'll get better at speaking with time, who knows. I just hope you can hear me. I hope you can understand me. Well, I sipped this last beer, the last beer of the night, because the shop's far and the one closer doesn't open until much later, so. In fact, I don't know what time it is. I wish I could see the time right now. My car is hidden from me. Oh, hang on. Oh, it's 2 a.m., so the shop's not open until 6, so I'm way early. But hey, boy's life, but something to do with waiting for liquor. Nah, I'm gonna go to bed after this beer. But, I wanted to do a reintroduction, a new hello onto my channel. So, in the last video, my return from the last time I took a big break, I was talking about mental health and just how mental health is. In fact, 1 minute, I think something's going on with the audio here. Let's see if I can fix that little problem. Is that better? That sounds better. Excuse me. So, yeah. Last time I was talking about mental health. First of all, maybe I should give a little backstory on who I am. Hi there, my name is SpookyLith. I'm from the UK. I live in a place called Liversedge. Liversedge is on the edge of Leeds, one of our major cities, in Yorkshire. I'm from Yorkshire, and that's how we say it here. We say Yorkshire. But yeah, let me put my pop shield back in front of the mic because I might be popping. Pop. See the difference it makes? But pop without, pop, and then pop with. Really does its job. So anyway, we were talking about mental health, but here we are in No Man's Sky, an absolute classic of a game. We know Starfield just came out. I have a lot to say about Starfield, but we'll get into that another time. For this video, we'll keep it simple. We're just going to do the reintroduction and try and not overthink it and not go too complicated. So No Man's Sky is the perfect, background generator. That's why I picked it, and it's such a pretty game. It's very scenic, very lovely. So we're going to sit in our ship and have a talk. I might do a bit of wandering, but it's loud and I'm happy just talking right now. Now, some people probably wonder, what's the point doing a long form video where you're just basically talking? And to be honest, this is the kind of thing I like to listen to when I go to bed. I'll listen to a podcast where it's just people talking, or if I'm busy doing something, I might listen to a podcast. But generally, this type of podcast where someone's kind of just speaking in like a bluesy tone and just, talking at a steady pace. I'm just playing, but this kind of content is something I like to watch or like to consume when I'm just relaxing and trying to fall asleep and stuff. And that's why I'm kind of making this. I want this to be something like that, where you might listen to it late at night, when you're tired and you're just looking for some content, something different, something esoteric maybe. I like to think I'm fitting into a couple of those categories, but we'll see. Only time will tell what kind of channel this will turn out to be. So mental health. We was talking last time about mental health. Now, I am a candidate for probably the worst mental health in the area. I've been in services for many years now. And honestly, it's been a really crazy time. My diagnosis is persistent delusion disorder, which, as you would imagine, is a fantastic one to have when you're trying to do commentary and trying to make content and stuff. And then the other one is social phobia, which of course is a phobia of social interactions and various other things that go with it. And this manifests into my life in a lot of ways. Mainly that I live a very isolated lifestyle. I stick to myself. I don't go out very often, and when I do, it's rush jobs. I'm rushing to get back home as soon as possible. And I'm sure a lot of people find that relatable. It just so happens that in my case, this comes attached with a genuine phobia, where there's a need. I need to get out of these situations. I can't stick around, and being in them for prolonged times causes me to act oddly, act out of place, just look generally uncomfortable, and you can just tell that I need to get out of there. I sweat profusely, shaky, looking around, very paranoid. Just not a pleasure to be around in social situations. So I spend 99% of my time inside and isolated. And that's where I have to be because of how my condition affects me now. One of the things that I really want to get into about mental health, and I think really what the point of this little bit is that mental health is a big category right now. A lot of people feel as though they fit into the mental health category, and I'm sure they do. But what people tend to forget when having this conversation is that, well, actually, mental health is something that's more on a spectrum than something that's so binary. It's not a matter of you have mental health issues or you don't. In reality, it is literally on a spectrum of nominal good, positive mental health. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have, the bad, the negative, the people with an issue, right? So it's on a spectrum. And while someone might be fine one day and they're on the end of the spectrum where their mental health is solid and they're feeling good, something can happen, some event, some situation, or even for no reason at all, they can find themselves further down the spectrum going towards the other side, which, if we take the two extremes as being completely fine and then on the other end complete psychotic breakdown, anybody who starts off on the left side of the spectrum can very quickly find themselves on the right side of the spectrum for just any number of reasons, right? So just the way we tend to look at mental health right off the bat is inherently flawed if we're looking at it in a binary sense. So I'm someone who's on the spectrum of, I've had psychotic breaks, I've been hospitalized from mental illness, so they would put me obviously quite on the far end of the spectrum. I've been hospitalized for a very long time at one point due to my mental health. Well, I say very long time, I mean everything's relative. It was a very long time for me. We're talking 2 months I spent in a hospital due to my mental health, which, if you've been sectioned, it's like the next tier up. You start off on the first tier, which will be like, a month maximum, but it's usually more like 2 weeks or a week. The next level would be a month, and then the next level would be beyond a month, and so on and so forth. It actually is a bit stricter than that with the sectioning. I can't remember the numbers, but one section is 2 weeks, one section is a month, one section is 6 months. But the way it actually works is it's actually case by case, where even if you're in there for a 6-month section, you might be out after a month if they deem you back to being, healthy, or healthy enough to not be in hospital. So I was in there for 2 months. It was the longest 2 months of my life, because when you're sectioned in a hospital, it's not some cushy gig where you're propped up on a hospital bed, come and go as you please, and everything's all positive. You're actually basically stuck in your room with cages on your window. Doors are all locked and you're not allowed to leave when you want. At first, you can't leave at all. Eventually, you can go for leave on the grounds and stuff like that. But it's all documented. It's all, you're not just coming and going as you please. And it's a pretty grim experience. I have to admit the nurses were fantastic. They make the experiences as comforting as they possibly can, and that's what they do, and they're damn good at it for the most part. I definitely felt a sense of care coming from the nurses. They really did care, even if with mental health a lot of the time it can feel a bit hopeless. It was very, 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 very empowering and refreshing to be surrounded by these really caring people that, regardless of what was going on with me, it shined through. Let me put it differently. It literally shined through my negative experience that I was having, my breakdown, that these people were still caring. So, if I'm seeing all this really dark, horrible stuff, these people were beacons of light. Like, there's a reason that they have these hospitals and people get sectioned, and my experience is one of those typical stories where, the people there, the nurses there, really did their job. The doctors, on the other hand, were a bit not so great for various reasons. It was a lot of fighting to get out of there, first of all. I had to fight the doctors a lot because I didn't feel as though I should have been in there. I had to appeal, I had to go through a whole thing, and the doctors were just completely unhelpful the entire time. The nurses are saying, this person, we don't think he should be here. This person seems to be better now that they've gotten past their psychotic break. The doctors were hell-bent on keeping me way longer than seemed necessary. And say what you want about the doctor's place versus the nurse's place. At the end of the day, the nurses are the ones boots on the ground who deal with us on a personal level. So they also have all the experience dealing with people in various conditions. They know what they're talking about, but the doctors very much treat the nurses like idiots, and it's sad. I understand where they come from, like, I'm the qualified one, I make the decision, but they should really be listening to the words of the nurses who work on the wards, who actually see how we interact and how we're getting on day by day and how we're living our lives. And if the nurses are saying, look, you don't need our care, then I shouldn't be in a hospital taking up a bed. And this was the argument I had to present to the doctor. Eventually I was let free, but it was a fight, it was a battle, and I wonder if that's because having us in there is good for their bucks, It's good for them, gives them bonuses, gives them nice wages. I don't know. It's a bit of a conspiracy theory, really. But it was a very, very much a fight trying to get out of there because of the doctors. But the nurses, amazing people. So, anyway, mental health is on a spectrum. And anybody who knows anything about mental health would agree with that. I happen to be an individual who's on the other end of that spectrum to where most people find themselves, we'll say. Sorry about that. I'll just kick my microphone and make the most horrific noise ever. It's no problem. Sorry, I'm in a bit of a tight enclosed space here, so it's a bit hard to move around. I'll try not to do that again. But this spectrum of mental health is such a spicy topic because everyone feels as though they have mental health problems. And with this society, this world we live in, I think that's true. But obviously we can't all be mentally ill, we can't all be breaking down, we can't all be going through that at the same time because the world would collapse, right? Common sense. But I think if we remember that mental health's on a spectrum and we just try and remember that as long as we're on this side of the spectrum, we'll be okay. And if we find ourselves on this side, it'll get better. Ultimately, that's what it's all about, right? But it's just, I say all this to say, getting pirates attacking the ship. I think we'll run away before they come for us. Hide safely by these freighters.
Warning. Threat detected.
They found some spicy stuff in my cargo. They want a bit of a fight. But a lot of people will tell you in terms of mental health, like, oh, just go to the gym, bro. Just get over it, bro. You'll be fine, bro. And various other forms of broisms. And it just doesn't work like that. When someone's having a genuine psychotic break, no amount of broism is going to get them out of it. It's plain and simple. Plain and simple. Well, people will tell you that it's binary, you either have it or you don't, and if you have it, you're some kind of loser, some kind of failure, some kind of something negative, and it's just not true. It's just simply not true. This fight's not going to go very well, because I obviously don't really want to concentrate that hard on it. So we're going to run planet side to get rid of these guys. No interest in fighting. But yeah, so that's a bit of an introduction to me and who I am, and where I stand with my mental health. It is flawed. I have got issues. I am medicated. Now, I used to be, for the first 5 years of being mentally ill, I was completely against any form of medication. I just wouldn't have it. But after having 2 psychotic breaks in a row, I got to a point where I realized, look, I can't argue with the professionals here anymore. I've ended up in hospital. I've gone from where I started as a student to being hospitalized from my mental illness. I can't stand there, look them in the face and say no to the medication. At that point, I have to take it. So I am again one of these people who is on this spectrum of mental health where I have to be medicated. It's not an option anymore. It's not a matter of I can just go to the gym and work it off. Bruh, in the early days of this mental health situation, I went to the gym. I did all these things. I went for runs and walks. I even before my first psychotic break, I was out walking all the time. We have something around my area where I live called the Greenway. That's what we call it locally. And it's this long path that basically goes from one city to another city, or from one city to a town. But the town's kind of like a city, but it's a town. Saying that probably with the demographics listening to this, your idea of a town and city is way different from the British idea. But that's by the by. It goes all the way from one city, passes through a bunch of villages and ends up in a town. And it's a long walk. And I was walking down that basically daily, just for fun, just for mental health reasons, right? And still found myself in a situation where I had psychotic breaks. So just goes to show, there's no one size fits all for everybody. I tried to do all those things that they say you should do. I tried to make it work and still ended up in a hospital. So don't take it lightly is what I'm trying to say. When people are really going through something, then they really are going through it, and sometimes medication is just the answer. It might not be the answer for you, and you should be really grateful over that, because honestly, when you get to a point where you're forcibly medicated, it's not nice, Nobody wants to go through that, especially if you're anti-medication in the first place, but I've learned to accept it. I've made my peace with it. I have to be medicated because I can't end up in hospital again. I refuse to end up in hospital again. So it's time to accept defeat and take the stupid medication and see how that treats me. So far, it's been interesting. Definitely feel a slowdown, but I kind of live my life in a very fast way, so maybe a slowdown isn't such a bad thing. I've gained a lot of weight. That's one of the biggest gripes I have with it. I'm constantly bringing this up and I'm constantly telling them, look, this isn't acceptable. Anybody who knows anything about antipsychotic medication and also antidepressants knows that they cause dramatic amounts of weight gain. It's really not much you can do about it due to the way it works. It slows down your metabolism. Even if you're eating the right things, you're still going to put on weight. It really messes you over. I've heard rumors that you can counteract it with hardcore gym work, hardcore dieting, being very strict, but with the way these medications affect you mentally, that is no easy feat. And power to you if you feel like you're the kind of person who, no matter the odds, will strive and will get that six-pack and that ripped bod no matter what's going on. I'm just telling you that in reality, as someone who was hardcore, you just simply can't do those things anymore. You're too slowed down, you're very heavy, your body feels so heavy, you're sedated. You gotta really bear in mind that these pills, these medications sedate you. You can't just get up and move around like you might want to. But there's a lot of positives and a lot of good things that do come with it that I can't deny has come with it. But the weight gain, oh my god, the weight gain is not a joke, and it's hard to fight. But we're fighting it, doing our best. But the nurses and all the people I see all agree, all unanimously say, yep, this is just what happens to people on this medication, and it's just accepted. And I kick off about this all the time. This should not be acceptable in any way, shape or form. The kind of weight gain that happens and how quickly it happens, before I even left hospital, I'd already gained a stone or two, I swear to God. I mean, I might be exaggerating, but that's what it felt like. I felt so heavy. and it's just been crazy. It's been really, really crazy to go through that. But again, this is after years and years of fighting the medication. I've had to accept it because of my circumstances. I can't, you know, when you say I can't go on like this, well, that's where I was at when I was in hospital. I can't go on like this. I can't. And the only option presented by the system is medication. The only options presented by people outside of the system are things I'd already tried. I've already done the vegetarian diet. I've already done the no medication. I've already done the exercise lifestyle. I've already done the herbal remedies. I've already done the nutritional stuff through your diet. I tried all of that and still found myself in a position where I had these psychotic breaks. So do with that what you will. I'd love for some other alternative to the medication. I truly would. But I've reached a point after 5 years, maybe even 6 years, where I had to just accept, okay, this is just getting worse despite me trying all these things. So that's the introduction to my mental health. It's just I wanted to touch on that. It's a really difficult subject to get into because everyone finds it so relatable. If you say you got depression, everyone's got depression. You say you're dealing with this, everyone's dealing with it. But they're not wrong. And that's the problem we make as the sort of people on the other end who have these mental illnesses. We look at them and go, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand what I'm going through. Well, actually, everything's on a spectrum here. And they might be depressed and you might be depressed, but it's on a spectrum and you can't kick off just because someone else says they relate to what you're going through, because maybe in some way they do relate, because maybe they're in a position on that spectrum where they're experiencing some of what you go through, or maybe they're experiencing all of it, or maybe they're experiencing more of it. Because the hardest part and the most important part when we're talking about mental health, the most important thing to remember is we can't check on each other like that. We can't check inside each other's heads. We can't verify if what you're seeing is what I'm seeing. You can't verify if what I'm hearing is what you're hearing. We just simply can't do that. So pretending and acting and judging each other like we can is ridiculous. You don't know how depressed that person is. They're just depressed. But depression's on a spectrum, so be understanding. Be patient with them. They might be on one end of the spectrum. They might be on the other end of the spectrum. There's really no way for us to know. So try and be nicer about that. Try and be more understanding that mental health is complicated and we shouldn't judge people. And don't judge the mentally ill person. You don't know what they went through to get to where they ended up. I went through hell and back with my mental health. I fought it in every way I possibly could. I hit the gym. The gym kicked my ass, bro. Like, I'd be there and I'd be lifting and I'd be thinking about my goals and how much I want to put my gains and I want to get my gains going, get my body looking good. And my head is just kicking my ass. Like, I mean, I can't even be specific in my case because it's all a bit too spicy, but I can give you an example, just an example of what it's like. In fact, this happened to me. This kind of happened to me, actually, so this is kind of based on my experience, but I'm still using it as an example, not a direct one-for-one. But I'd be there lifting, pounding away, lifting these weights, right? And in my head's just running this whole fucking narrative of how my mum's just being murdered at that precise moment. I'm there lifting, and all I'm seeing in my head is just visions of my mother being stabbed to death. And it's just like the darkest shit. And there's nothing I could do. I was listening to music, I was focused on my lifting, focusing on my body, but the intrusion of that way of thinking, the way my delusions would hit me, it was just, I'd hit my last rep and I'd just be like, this is kicking my ass, this is totally kicking my ass. I'm not just dealing with the gym on a physical level, I'm having to fight my own mind. And also hit these weights and have the mental strength to hit the weights. And I did it for a significant time. I did my best, but it kicked my ass with the amount of stuff I would go through to the point where it just wasn't viable. This was, to be honest, I was pretty heavy on the exercise, and like I say, this all kind of lasted right up until I had my psychotic break. But that's me coming from someone who was hitting the gym, doing all the right things, watching my diet. I was eating so healthily too. Should have seen what I was eating. I was eating like a piece of meat and 2 potatoes. That was my meal. And then I'd have some greens at some point. But like that was what I was eating. So healthy, so clean food. And still ended up in a psychotic break. So watch out when people are telling you to just exercise your way through it. It's not that simple. Depending on what your illness is, depending on where you are on the spectrum, it's going to dramatically affect how you're able to live your life. Now, In the last video, one of the things that had really triggered me, and I hate that word triggered, but we're going to use it for simplicity's sake. One of the things that really triggered me that had happened was I'd had an appointment with a doctor, and he basically gave me that spiel. He basically said, lifestyle, 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 lifestyle. And I looked at him and I was just like, bruh, if I was capable of maintaining that lifestyle, I wouldn't be mentally ill. We wouldn't be having this conversation. The whole reason I'm here is because I can't maintain that lifestyle and want to, and have made efforts to, but I found myself getting my ass kicked while trying to. In some of the most horrific, like that example I gave is just an example, never mind the actual realities of the stuff you experience. Here, you know, when you're hearing voices, you're seeing shit, you're seeing like a person will be looking straight ahead and they're on another machine and they're lifting weights and you're looking straight ahead and you're lifting, and out the corner of your eye, what do you see? You just see them staring at you, and you look at them and they're not looking at you, and you look away and you see them staring at you out the corner of your eye. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about when you're just trying to lift some weights, right? And if going to the gym was going to solve that, then I wouldn't be seeing that stuff while I was lifting plates, would I? I'd only see that if I wasn't lifting or if I wasn't keeping up with my routine. But no, as I'm lifting, I'm seeing this stuff, and it's like, how am I supposed to maintain this routine and be dealing with what I'm perceiving as this horrific shit? It's like a walking horror movie. And that's the one thing I want to say about mental health. Going through the genuine stuff, the schizophrenia, the whatever people call this shit, when you actually go through that, it's like being in an actual literal horror movie. It's horrible. It's a horrible experience. You're always scared, you're always paranoid, you're always on edge because you're seeing scary shit all the time, or you're hearing scary shit all the time, or you're thinking horrific shit all the time. And don't get me wrong, it's not always all my mum's being murdered. That was an example, and it's a shocking example, but that's reality. But it's other things. It can be, my girlfriend's cheating on me. It can be, the debt collectors are coming, or the police are coming, or I don't know what the fuck people go through. But it could be anything. It could be the aliens are coming. But the problem isn't that you think there's aliens coming. The problem is you're seeing them. You're experiencing it. You're actually experiencing all the stuff that goes along with that. The only catch is, there might not be any aliens, but you're experiencing them as real as they are to you. Like, that's the difficulty of it. And like I said before, we can't check. You can't verify this. Now, this is a conversation I had with another doctor, just to go on the tail end of that now. Basically, when we approach mental health, we approach it with this attitude of dismissal. If a person says, oh, I think I'm being spied on by the government, or I think aliens are messing with my mind, or whatever crazy shit people come out with, right? The first protocol is to dismiss it outright. There's no such thing as aliens. The government isn't spying on you. You're being ridiculous. Why would the government spy on you? Why would aliens be interested in you? And our first point of call is dismissal. And what this does, obviously, is push a person into isolation, because then they feel as though no one understands what they're experiencing and blah, 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 blah. Now, my solution to this would be something simple, and this is as a person who deals with delusions, would be to indulge a person in their delusion. Take the opposite approach. Instead of dismissing them and saying, nah, you're just crazy, bro, say to them, or ask them, okay, if that's happening, how does it work? Where are they coming from? Ask them to break it down. Ask them to just go into detail, because what you'll find is most people who are, first of all, truly delusional won't be able to walk you all the way down their train of thought. At some point, they're going to fall off the train, and it's going to just go down to, because I just feel like it, or because I just think so, or it's going to devolve and it's going to derail. And that can be and I said this to the doctor, and he did agree, that can just be your litmus test for where this person is with their experience. How much does this person actually believe what they're saying? Get them to explain it. Get them to break it down for you. If you've got the time, we don't always have the time, but if you have the time and your friend's saying some stuff that sounds a little spicy, you should just sit there and say, okay, explain it to me. Walk me through it. Tell me what's going on, and just take them seriously for 5 minutes. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm not asking you to change your core beliefs and become whatever they're going through. But I am saying, give this person 5 minutes to explain themselves, because for all you know, for all any of us know, and this is back to the whole thing I was saying about how we can't check, they might be right. They just might be right, or they just might be onto something, or maybe something is going on. So a good example of this, I don't want to get too much into the conspiratorial stuff right now, but if you go Google V2K technology, it's called, and that's voice to skull, V2K. Basically, the technology exists and it's patented and the government has it and it's real technology. It's not some made up sci-fi shit. It's a very, very, very real piece of technology that enables soldiers, I think the context of it is the military, to put voices in people's heads and have them hearing stuff. Another name for it is the mind of God or the voice of God technology. But it's V2K. Google V2K and it'll come up. And if that doesn't come up for whatever reason, just search voice to skull. It will come up there. And you'll see loads of academic papers and information about what V2K is. And that is just an example of how someone can say, I'm hearing voices, and here we have a very real piece of technology that would literally cause a person to hear voices, right? And without checking, without looking into this person, seeing if maybe someone's messing with them, doing some scans around them, without checking, how do we know that person's not being messed with using this type of technology? And this is the harsh truth that a lot of people don't want to accept, because it's hard to accept, because it's hard to realize maybe we're wrong. But this is the thing people don't want to do, and just realize that just maybe that person's actually being messed with. They might be. And why are we wasting all these resources, all this medical stuff, all these doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists? What's the point of all these people doing all the stuff they're doing if this person's actually just getting messed with by their neighbor who's copied some piece of technology? And by the way, yes, this technology can be built in a garage. Just do your research. V2K, voice to skull. It's very real. I'm not saying this is happening to me, because I've found myself in 2 psychotic breaks and hospitalized. So I'm not using that as a defense for myself here. I'm just saying that the technology quite literally exists that can cause any individual to hear voices. And it's very accessible. It's not hard to get. So this is what I mean about how it's important that instead of just dismissing people's delusions out of hand, we should actually spend the time to explore them and let them explain them and walk down their train of thought and see where they might be coming from, because it's pointless wasting however many thousands of pounds or dollars going through the motions with someone if they're not even mentally ill. That's a waste of taxpayers' money, right? And then just the other part of that conversation was, well, the one thing the doctor said, which was pretty funny, was, yeah, you're right, we should check. And if I had a device that would allow me to bleep, 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 check a person's head and see if they're getting beams sent at them, I'd use that. And I said, exactly, you would. Of course you would. Because that's the whole point. You want to treat this person. You don't want to waste your time on them. So then I went on to the next point, which is, so okay then, if you're saying if you had a device that could scan a person's head and check they were getting messed with, you'd use it. So why then? Now this might not apply to the Americans or to other countries. I don't know how the mental health system works in other countries. But in the UK, this is how it works. When you go through the NHS, they do not, and I repeat, they do not, at any point during the years and years of treatment you'll go through with the mental health services, they will not ever scan your head. They'll never do an EEG. They'll never do any kind of brain scan, MRI, whatever it might be. They won't do any of it. So you explain to me how we're medicating and treating individuals without first checking what's actually going on inside their skulls. And this is again connected back to that original point. Why, of checking, let's check first. Before we start dismissing people as mentally ill, before we start shutting down people's experiences and treating them like they're lesser, let's check there's actually something up with them. Because the doctor said, if we had the technology to check, that we would. And I'm saying, well, we already have technology that can check and we're not using it. So, do with that what you will. That's just my stance on mental health as an individual who's been dealing with this shit for a very, very long time now. I hope my perspective was clear. I hope you understood what I was trying to say. It was a bit long. 30 minutes of talking about mental health is just too much mental health for anybody. But that is an introduction to me, because the mental health has just been a big part of who I am for years. So, yeah. But moving on, we got to move on to another subject now. We can't talk about this any longer. But just remember that when someone says they're experiencing something, just ask them to explain it, because worst case scenario, they stumble on themselves and don't know what the hell they're talking about. Best case scenario, you get a really good book out of it. That's what I said to the doctor, and he laughed and he agreed. and it's just true. Check first, because you just never know. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is politics. Now, I know, here we go, politics, right? But politics is a very, 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 very broad category, and on this channel we're going to get into that in and out quite a lot. But what I really wanted to talk about was this idea of the left versus the right. We have this left versus right dynamic, and it's been raging on for a few years now. I know we've always had left and right in politics, of course, but I don't think I've ever seen it so widely pushed and so mainstream as I have in the past couple of years. It's become everything. Now you can't have a political conversation without talking about the left or the right. And it's just a mess. It's a mess because everyone thinks they're right. Everyone has their own ideas of how everyone else should live. And if you think about what politics really is, that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about the rules, the laws, the governing of everyone, right? And everybody fancies themselves as a bit of a prime minister. Everyone thinks that they could be the one running the show, telling everybody else how to live, right? But we all have different values, we all have different perspectives, and we all feel differently about what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. Of course, you have the left, the liberals. They think everyone should be partying all the time and it should be a free love, man, the hippies and shit. And then you have the people on the right who are the suit wearers, who are the ones saying family values and none of this partying and everyone should be hunkered down and working hard and sweating all the time. And, you know, we just have this divide. And it's because, again, we all have different perspectives. Some people think working is the greatest thing ever. Some people think working is just a form of slavery. Some people think working is necessary for a functioning society. Some people think working is necessary, but not unless everyone's getting a fair share of the benefits. And who's right, right? Who's right? I've always looked at politics like this, common sense.
Incoming storm.
Right? Common sense. Think about it like this, right? I'm about to blow your mind with something here. Because people miss this, and I think this is the most blatant thing we should always start from in politics, and it's common sense. A person needs certain things to live. Before they do anything else, to simply exist, a person needs a bunch of things, right? They need water, shelter, food, air, and warmth, right? I hope I didn't say that twice. So a person needs those 5 things just to exist before they do anything else. Now, you want a person to work, and we want people in jobs because we want society to move and we want things to happen, right? Common sense tells me that in order to have a worker, you need an individual who has those 5 things covered, right? Food, shelter, water, warmth. Food, shelter, water, warmth, and whatever the other one was, right? You need them. You can't live without them. Okay? Common sense says that all our politics should be based around the basic idea that every individual needs those 5 things. Yet we don't do that. Our politics isn't based on that. And this is where my political stance might be a little bit spicy for a lot of people, but I just feel like it's the stuff that people just miss. They just miss it out. And it's just the common sense stuff. Common sense dictates that all people need those basic things. If people are not getting those basic things, we can't expect them to be workers. How are you going to work with no food in your belly? How are you going to travel to work with no roof over your head? How are you going to work when you're thirsty? How are you going to work if you can't fucking breathe? You get my point. You need these things to just exist. So our politics should be driven with that from the very beginning. And the fact that it's not is just where I switch off from this politics business. So whether you're on the left or you're on the right, to me, it all looks kind of silly because we're not even focused on stuff that matters. I mean, maybe they are on the left, a bit more focused on, you know, providing shelter for people, healthcare for people, fine. But I still think we're missing the fundamentals of people need these 5 things before they can do anything else. We can't talk politics without having none of those 5 things, you know what I mean? We can't even have this conversation, so. But one thing I've noticed is a lot of the people that seem to be against those people having those 5 basic things seem to be people who have those 5 basic things in abundance, kind of trying to tell everybody else that they shouldn't have them or they're not entitled to them. And it's always easy to be sitting there on a throne made of fucking gold, telling the peasants that they can't have any of the gold because you're how sat in it all, right? But that's just not how reality should work. From a common sense perspective, common sense dictates, well, actually, if everyone, right, let me put it differently. If everyone has those 5 basic needs met, then it really doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. But when people are missing 1 or 2 of those needs, that gold throne is looking, it looks really different, doesn't it? But it's all well and good sitting there when you have everything saying that people are not entitled to anything. But it's the thing we've always said, and it's something that I think needs to be said a lot more often. Put these politicians in an actual average Joe's situation. Take away all their assets. Take away everything, take away their access to. I'm not saying take it away permanently, but take away their access to all their stuff. Put them in the shoes of an average working Joe. Give them a job. Give them a social housing and start them off. And just see how they get on and see what they think of the lifestyle. And you tell me if everyone's needs are being met. But, it'll just never happen. Politics are run by the rich, and the rich just don't care what the poor are going through because the rich already have theirs. They don't care if anybody else is getting it. So, yeah, common sense politics, that's what I think we should be following, common sense. Just good old-fashioned basic common sense. We need certain things. You can't work without eating. You can't work without water. You can't work without shelter. You can't work without breathing. And air, and I know it seems stupid to mention that we need to breathe, but look at what we're doing to the air. Supposedly, I know there's a lot of hot debate on climate science and whether we're polluting the air, but I don't need a climate scientist to tell me that the air in London City is polluted. I don't need a scientist to tell me that. Even if it doesn't have long-lasting effects on the earth or whatever, it definitely has long-lasting effects on my lungs right now. So we're polluting the air too. Let's not kid ourselves. Climate science aside, we definitely pollute the fuck out of that city air. I just took a deep breath and I was like gagging on it. But yeah, politics should always have been and should always be common sense based. Now, what is common sense, isn't it? That's the tricky part. Not everyone has it. Not everyone knows what it really is. How do you define common sense? And that's the hard part. And I'm not saying there's an easy answer to that. I just feel like I'm an individual who sees the common sense in these things, and maybe you need someone like me in a position where we can put these things out there. Maybe people are missing this stuff, and maybe you do need a voice. I'm not saying my voice, I've got too much shit going on, but someone like me who sees it in that way, they should definitely be in a position where they have a say. But good luck with that, because anyone with common sense gets taken out. We can't have any of that around here. And that's just the sad truth of it. The people who come out with all these things that just seem obvious. So anyway, bringing the conversation back to the left right now, I've always looked at it like some of this stuff that we're arguing about just seems like common sense. I don't want to get too into the spicy subjects here because it's so divisive and so inflammatory for people. But just things like, when I mentioned social housing, you have some people on one side saying that we shouldn't have social housing, and people, if they can't afford a house, should be living in the streets. And then you have people on the other side saying, no one should live in the streets. People should be provided housing by the state because we have the houses, and they should be given to people and distributing the wealth, basically. The people on the right, as far as I can tell, the way this is divided is the right tends to lean towards no social housing, the left leans towards having social housing. The problem, once again, is the people on the right saying that we shouldn't give houses to people are people who generally own their own houses. People who, as we were saying before, who have the haves, they're the haves telling the have-nots that they shouldn't have anything, right? Why should you get social housing when I have to work for mine? It's like, it doesn't, the world, we know, we can, again, this is an example of where common sense comes into it. We can just look at that with common sense and go, that's not how the world works. Yeah, you got lucky and your career worked out and things worked well for you, but for every one of you, there's 20 average Joes who we didn't work out for. And yeah, you might feel like you have some entitlement over them, you're better than them in some way, but the reality is, boots on the ground, you're not better than them in any way. You just got lucky, or you got successful, or you whatever worked for you worked for you. Doesn't work for everyone, and what we're trying to find is a solution that works for everyone. If you lost all your assets today, I would love for you to be able to still find a house. If you went broke, if you went bankrupt, if it all went to pot, I would very much love for you as an individual to have something to fall back on. I don't want to see you in the streets ever, no matter who you are. And that's the kind of attitude that I feel like comes with common sense, to be honest. It's just common sense. You're a person, you need shelter. It's one of the 5 tenets, remember? So it comes down to common sense. But it's a complicated subject, and we'll be covering politics a lot too, so I don't want to dwell too long on the politics. But spicy stuff, as always, you know. Very, very spicy subject when we're talking politics. I don't know what's going to be showing on the screen here. I'm just looking for something. I just needed to check something, but I might not be able to. Bear with me a moment. You know what? I don't even... Oh, it's there. I think I found what I was looking for. So, yeah, actually... One of the other really hot topics coming out of the left-right divide right now. Oh, my screen's gone blank out, it's back. One of the really spicy dividing topics is this idea of transgenders, right? Good God, I have never seen such a divisive conversation as I have seen when it comes to people being able to reassign their genders. And I just can't with this conversation, because once again, it comes down to just bone idle common sense, right? If an individual, first of all, before we get into the medical stuff and all the important details, if a person decides as an adult, we're starting off with adults, if a person decides as an adult to reassign their gender, that should be nobody's business but their doctors, right? Can we agree? If an adult decides to do anything, if they want to get a nurse job, if they want to get, let's have a look. I don't even know. I was going to say bionics. I don't think we're quite at the stage of bionics yet. But if someone invents bionics, right, and we get like eye optics and upgrades for our bodies, if you want to go get one of those upgrades, should you not be allowed to do that off your own dime, off your own decision making as an adult, right? Common sense says yes, of course you should. You should be able to modify your body however you want. Tattoos, go for it. Artwork, whatever. Plastic surgery, whatever. And that's where we're going to the gender reassignment now. What is gender reassignment? There's not many levels. There's a couple of levels to it. And one of those levels, funnily enough, is plastic surgery. A person who goes and gets surgery to masculinize or feminize themselves. Don't know if masculinize is a word, but I'm just going to say that. Or to feminize themselves. Now, those are cosmetic surgeries to make them look different. Should they be allowed to do that? Should a man who was formerly a man be allowed to go get himself a pair of breasts? I think yes, because again, it's his body, his choice, their body, their choice, right? And I just think if you apply that logic of you going and getting Botox to make yourself look younger to someone going to get a breast job to make themselves look more feminine, then I think it's pretty clear and pretty much common sense that yes, they should be entitled to that surgery. Now, if we bring that into the medical sphere, if a person needs any kind of surgery, regardless of severity, if they need any kind of surgery at all, I think we can already conclude pretty safely that that's nobody's business but theirs and their doctors, right? Using the same logic. It doesn't involve anybody else. It doesn't involve anybody else other than them and their doctors and the law. We'll throw the law in there because obviously it's got to be legal too. And now, bringing the medical aspect of, look, if they need it, they need it. Bringing it down to children. Now, I think anything involving children requires extra levels of care, extra levels of, investigation and legislation and just making sure the kids are safe, right? And I think we can all get behind that. I'd like to think so. We want to protect the young. So everything involving young people should have extra levels of red tape and bureaucracy behind it. Of course it should. But at the same time, it still boils down to the child, the parents, and the doctor, and the law. That still doesn't involve anybody else. It never has, and it never will. And this is where we come back to what politics is. Politics is deciding how people should live their lives. We have this massive push from people essentially saying, I don't want people to be able to have these life-changing surgeries, whether they're adults or children. Because that's the sneaky part about this. People will say, what about the children? But they want to ban these surgeries for adults too. It's not subtle, they're just using the children. Even though we can look at statistics, we should probably look up some statistics. I'm going to do that right this moment. So, what we want to know is, I'm going to try to stick to the UK, but I'm just going to go with whatever comes up in Google. And I whacked the mic again, I'm sorry for that. So, number of children that are transgender. That's a bit of a shitty search, but we'll go for it. Sharp rise in transgender young people, whatever. It's not what we're looking for. Right, we've got to be careful here because there's a difference between social transition and medical transition. I'm looking specifically for people who are receiving medical care, not just people who identify differently, although that's important too. But I want to focus on the medical, the stuff that people are talking about. Alright, I'm not getting a clear number on this. Let's have a look on this. This is telling me about the number of children in the United States that are basically seeking medical care. So diagnosis of youth with gender dysphoria. In 2021 we're talking 50,000 6 to 17-year-olds that are diagnosed with gender dysphoria. And then we have a number here, a number of patients aged 6 to 17, if I should bring this page over here. So, we can see here, number of patients at this age with gender dysphoria diagnosis initiating puberty blocker treatment. We have a number of 1,390 in 2021. So, I don't think you need me to whip out a calculator to talk about how significantly low that number is compared to the amount of children there are in the United States. So in terms of percentages, I'm not even sure if we can give that a percentage. It'd be like 0.1 or 0.001 or something. So that's the numbers of children, on puberty blockers receiving treatment. We're talking less than 2,000 children who have been diagnosed and then treated. I have kind of forgotten what point I was going to make. But the point is, like, that's a low number of cases of medical intervention for gender dysphoria in children. Incredibly small. Now, I know the argument people make is, well, one's too many, but we have to remember what this is we're talking about. We're talking about children who are diagnosed with a medical condition to where their doctor has prescribed them with treatment for their condition. Again, this is something that comes down to common sense. That's between the patient, the doctor, and the parents, and the law, right? And obviously we're talking about politics, how people want to change these laws to govern how other people should live. Now, you know what, I've forgotten why I even looked that statistic up, to be completely honest. I'm trying to walk myself back, but I've forgotten. But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. Because we're talking about trans rights, we're talking about something so divisive that it wouldn't matter what I said. Some people are just hardlined against it. And I think this is where we have a real problem in politics in general, which is a lot of people are gunning for things that they personally don't like, and they just want to impose that on other people. And that's just the danger of politics. That's the danger of dealing with people on a political level, and it's why people often just can't be bothered having the conversation, because nobody wants to sit there and have a conversation telling you how you should or shouldn't live your life. And that's what this trans right conversation really comes down to. Is some people just don't like it for religious reasons sometimes it's just for personal reasons. They just don't like it and they just don't want people to do it, and that's the only reason they're really pushing for it. You know, less than 2,000 kids in the entirety of the United States are going through transgender treatment, yet they're using the kids as the scapegoat as to why adults shouldn't be doing it. And it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument. Because anything that involves you intervening with something private that doesn't involve you it's insane. It's absolutely insane. That people wholeheartedly, genuinely think it's acceptable to tell others how to live in that capacity. But anyway, I have forgotten where I was going with that one. I should have had it written down, really. I was too busy thinking about... I wasn't even thinking about anything. I was just too busy looking up that stupid statistic and just thinking about what I was reading. But, yeah. Politics in general. It's a difficult subject to cover. There's a lot to it. I mean, that's an understatement, but there's just a lot to it when we're talking about this left-right divide. And a lot of it just boils down to people trying to tell other people how to live. And it's just petty when we should be using common sense. We shouldn't be using our own personal grievances and gripes with things as a driving force behind our politics. We should be using something like common sense politics, boots on the ground politics. There's so many other options, and people are just gunning hard for the I don't like it, therefore it shouldn't be happening perspective, and it's just pathetic. But that's what politics is to people. It's their way of trying to control everybody. They might not want to admit that to themselves, but that's where it is. They just want to control what everybody else is doing, and they think politics is the way to do it. And it's sad. It's sad that that's what our politics has devolved into. People's petty opinions and shit that doesn't involve them. Your doctor said you should be treated for this, therefore I disagree, and therefore you shouldn't be allowed to get that treatment. Imagine thinking like that. It's sad. But say what you want about children going through transgender surgeries and not surgeries, treatments. I mean, it's up to the doctor. The doctor is the one who has to assess that child. And I agree that there should be a lot more checks and balances for when a young person is going through any kind of surgery or any kind of treatment. Sorry, I keep saying surgery, I mean treatment. Any treatment, they should be under extra scrutiny because we're talking about a child. But that doesn't mean they should be blocked from treatment because you don't like what they're going through. Anyway, could go on about that all day. It's just something that hits close to home, but it's a bit crap when you forget what you're saying because you haven't prepared or written anything down. But that's the gist of it, really. That's my reintroduction video. It's a bit long-winded, as all good things are. But yeah, like, it's a pleasure to be back. Hopefully I actually stick to it this time and do more videos. I'll try and talk about current events and stuff that's going on as opposed to just random subjects. And we'll see from there. Didn't really do much gaming this time, but I'm not a very good multitasker. It's either game or talk, not both. So I decided to talk. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure being back. Hopefully my audio quality is better. My speech isn't any better, but hopefully the quality of the audio is. That much should be improved. Yeah, didn't really want to talk about politics. I'm a bit burnt out now. A bit exasperated, but it's just so much ground to cover. When I actually talk on these subjects properly, not just introducing myself, when I actually speak about these subjects properly, I do plan on following a bit of a guide so I won't get so lost. I did have a mini guide here, but all it said was trans rights, and I've just started ranting, as I often do when it comes to trans rights, because I just think it's a silly argument. Even the toilet situation, it's like, it's as simple as this, right? one toilet has a urinal built into it because it accommodates certain equipment, we'll say, right? So depending, all it comes down to is what equipment you've got. If you have one set of tools, there's a bathroom for you. If you have the other set, there's a bathroom for you. I've never understood how that conversation got so complicated. It's literally, that's the whole point of having urinals in a bathroom, is for people who have the equipment to use them. It's an insane argument from both sides. It's an insane argument because it's just common sense. That bathroom has urinals in it for a reason. It don't matter what gender you identify as. If you got a hose pipe, then you got a hose pipe. Like, use it. But hey, some things are just too difficult for the average common man these days. So anyway, what are we going to talk about next time? Well, we'll just see. We'll see what's in the news. And I need to do my spooky segment, so I haven't got a spooky segment lined up today. Because I just didn't plan this, I just winged this. Total winged this. But if I remember what I used to do, I used to come over here onto Reddit. And I just would go into one of the random spooky subreddits. I'd have a quick scroll. And then pick a couple of things that I thought was cool or spooky, and then just kind of critique them for their spookiness. I'm not going to do a bunch of them. I'm just going to do one that I've picked at random. So I've got this one here. Can't really get that any bigger. But you can see a classroom of some type. It's got that haze to it. And we've got a bunch of floating candles just eerily floating there, giving it that spacey feeling. And I just like the look of that picture, so I'm going to put that picture right there. Oh, I'm going to cover it up with No Man's Sky because I don't know what I'm doing. And I'll leave that picture right there as we look at this and just think about the spooky vibes it gives you. Just going to have a moment of silence. Pretty spooky if you ask me. Anyway, I've been SpookyLith. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Peace out.